our North Star from a communications perspective is we want to build trust with
Uh-huh.
policymakers constantly. Like that's our bread and butter.
Right.
We want to help them by providing evidence-based insights into what's happening because like they are representing their constituents. They want to know what's happening. How can we make their lives better?
Welcome to Comms Confidential. This is the podcast where we pull back the curtain on the communications and PR industry and talk to those who are shaping our reality and managing the brands and the reputations and the crises that you hear about in the news every day. I'm your host, Joe Gallo, and I'm excited to welcome our first guest, Amanda Russo, the Director of Communications for the Crypto Council for Innovation. Amanda, thanks for joining us on Comms Confidential. Would love to hear a bit about your journey from the start of your career to your current role as Director of Communications for the Crypto Council for Innovation.
Thanks, Joe, so much for having me on. Yeah, I started out uh not in comms at all. So I started as a terrorism analyst. I was living in London. I had just done my grad work and was studying how Sunni extremism was impacting the risks to U.S. businesses abroad. And the company I was working for at the time was getting ready for a sale, and we didn't really know this, but their new managing director kind of said, "We need a communications team. We need someone to, get us in the press, to do more conferences." And so they asked me, and I was just like, I was like, "What is this? I don't know how to do this." And they're like, "Oh, you'll figure it out. Like, you don't mind talking to strangers on the phone, like, you're very personable, you work with all the desks, so you know everyone." And so I said to them, I said, "Look, I'm like 23 years old, 23, 24. If you guys think I can be good at this, and if you don't mind me doing trial and error, yeah, I'm in. Let's see how this works." Because it was right about the time where if you were doing analysis, you had to make a decision. You either went back to the US to join
Uh-huh.
like the alphabet soup, like the FBI, CIA, or whatever. And I had friends who did that. The other group of friends were going to Afghanistan, they were going to Iraq, they were learning the language, you were on site.
Uh-huh.
And I really didn't know how to have that conversation with my mom and be like, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to go to Afghanistan." That would not have gone over well. And I didn't really want to go. So I said to him, "Let's try this. Let's see what's going on. This is what you're supposed to do in your 20s." The first day of the job was the Arab Spring. This was 2011. And I was handed this like printout of what was an Excel sheet with potential phone numbers on it of journalists. Because like
Okay.
someone had something, they grabbed this thing.
So a
So I was
media
like,
list. It
it
was a,
was a media list, but like sort of like half baked. Like some of it had first names, some of it had like it was all over the place.
uh-huh.
So I was like, what do I all right, well, I gotta get people on TV. That was the brief. You've never done this before. It's the Arab Spring. No one knows get people on TV. I was like, okay. So I would literally call up these phone numbers and sometimes they would answer, like news desk. We'd be like, "Hi, I've got this analyst. We're from a intelligence company. We've got someone who's, from the region, for the region. They can tell you XYZ." And sometimes they would say, "Thank you, no thanks, goodbye. Like, who is this?" And other times they would say, "Send me more information by email," or that some of them just said, "Yes. Can I talk to this person?" Because they needed people to tell them like
Right.
what was going on. And so through this whole initial process, started with Tunisia and then you went to Egypt and then it
Uh-huh.
was this like growing situation. And because I understood the topic, because I worked with the analysts, I was able to be that link between the media and the people who were doing these very like complicated briefs and briefing insurance people, reinsurance, corporate security, government,
Okay.
all this cool stuff. And I loved it. It was this really fascinating thing where I was like, okay, I can actually understand both things and translate it just like I would like translate different stuff for my friends to say like, okay, well, like this is what you need to know. This is what's going on. And it was great. So from there I was hooked because I realized I could learn about everything and not just like one specific topic, which was going to be a potential path for me. It was like, we're going to
Uh-huh.
just focus on this for a while, but now it's like what's going on with the Brazilian real because we had this whole economics team, what's going on with the US trade deficit. Like it was fascinating. So from there I was really hooked on comms
So
and
you
what
got
we
to
could
try
do.
a lot of different areas of comms. It wasn't just intelligence or security.
Exactly. Yeah, there was an economics team, and then that company did get purchased by this big data and analysis company called IHS. So IHS Market is now part of S&P Global.
Mhm,
And so that made it even bigger. So that from managing like 30 analysts, I went to managing 400 analysts because it was just a company of 14,000 people. And we were in the London office, so we were in charge of Europe, the Middle East, and Africa.
mhm.
And it was an even bigger team of economists, a bigger team. We introduced tech. So there were all these other people who were talking about. I remember very clearly it was like a whole thing on how people were searching in apps for the first time. And it was like, yeah, you're gonna go in an app and like search for information. They were doing all these different trend reports and stuff. And they're like, yeah, like this is like the future stuff. So I had these like very serious defensey conversations with like folks about like Al Qaeda and ISIS and defense
Mhm.
spending. So like the NATO defense spending stuff that everyone's been talking about. We were talking about those defense numbers in Europe way back in like 2013. It was the same types of conversations to these like really positive conversations about tech where
Mhm.
you're just like, these things can solve it. So it was like very, very negative and like really, really optimistic and positive. So that's kind of was my intro into the tech world was through that acquisition when I picked up a bunch of analysts and then did like Mobile World Congress and
Mhm.
all of these other like fun things that were happening. So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
So how did you get from risk and security analyst, because
Yes.
you started as an analyst, to director of comms at, and I'm going to start calling it CCI so the listeners
The
know,
crypto.
but
Yeah.
the Crypto Council for
That's
Innovation.
the
Help me bridge that journey a little bit.
okay. So when I went to IHS one of the virtues of just saying yes is what led me on the path of where we are today. So I did get some like very good advice at the very beginning where it was where this boss of mine said, just say yes, you'll figure it out. People will help you and always talk in a meeting. If you're in the meeting, someone brought you there for a reason, you have
Mhm.
to add value to the meeting. He was a very, very good boss. And so someone left on my team and I was asked to do Davos. So Davos being the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Switzerland, a lot of people know it, it seems like it's a very glamorous event with like heads of state and CEOs and people in
Yep.
the mountains. And so my journey to crypto started at the World Economic Forum, which is kind of different. But I got to know through the whole process at IHS and going to do Davos like 5 or 6 times with the CEO there and the chief economist. I remember the last Davos that I did with them before I left for another job. I said to the CEO, we were talking about talking points, and this was 2016. And I said, hey, there's this thing called blockchain and Bitcoin. And I think, this could be a real differentiator for you if we were one of the people to start talking about this because it's going to be a thing. It's kind of like it's been a while, but it's a thing. And he was like, "What? Like what?" I would throw ideas out there because at least it was a conversation. So he passed on that because there were other company priorities. We were a publicly traded company at that point, so it
Mhm.
wasn't the right kind of time for them to start talking about this stuff. But I I was pinched by the World Economic Forum's media team. So I left IHS to go work for the World Economic Forum. One
Oh,
of those
wow.
projects was the blockchain and distributed ledger technologies project run by Sheila Warren. So a few years later, we'll fast forward, Sheila was pinched to run the Crypto Council for Innovation. So when she was leaving, and I was looking to come back stateside, she was like, do you want, hey, we've been working on this stuff for like 7 years at this point, 6, 7 years together. Do you want to come and run comms for me then? So I was like, absolutely. Like, we've been doing this at WEF for a long time. I would love to kind of run my own shop and do this in DC. So it's been a really kind of very interesting thing that a very traditional organization like the World Economic Forum was my intro into crypto.
Yeah. So let's ground everyone.
Mm,
CCI is a DC-based trade organization.
that is correct.
PayPal uses them. A lot of other companies use them.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the type of work that you do. On the communication side, obviously, a lot of people know trade organizations. They work with Congress, they work with different stakeholders to move agendas forward. But from a communications perspective, since we're focused on the comms professional, what's your day to day?
What do we
What's the big campaign that you work on?
My gosh. It's been such a crazy ride since 2022 working
Uh-huh.
full time in crypto comms. As you know, we've been through some things. We've been through some things together. So, the Crypto Council was really kind of started to bring this international worldview to all of the different jurisdictions that we are based in. We're operational in 4 different, economies. So we're in Hong Kong, we're in Brussels, we're in London, and we're in DC, but we also have folks who are looking after US state policy as well as federal. So we kind of have this framework as global dock connectors because this technology is evolving so quickly all over the world that we really view our job is to kind of bring that, for example, to DC, bring and say, like, this is what's happening. We do not want the US to get left behind. Here's what's going on in all of these other jurisdictions. Like, we have partnerships with associations in Japan. We're working a lot with people across, all 27 member countries in the EU. So there's a lot of stuff to piece together. Our job is to kind of bring that in what I like to call a helper elf way to members of Congress, along with the viewpoints of our member organizations, because we
Uh-huh.
represent companies like PayPal, like Coinbase. They're very mature, like Circle, also publicly traded. We want to make sure that we have clear rules of the road. And what do those rules of the road look like? Because everyone wants innovation to thrive. Everyone wants companies to do well. So we just have to give those rules of the road so people can have that growth across the board. That's what we're kind of focused on. So our North Star from a communications perspective is we want to build trust with
Uh-huh.
policymakers constantly. Like that's our bread and butter.
Right.
We want to help them by providing evidence-based insights into what's happening because like they're representing their constituents. They want to know what's happening. How can we make their lives better? So we have to kind of show the proof, show the work. Like, what does this mean? If you do A, how does that lead to B? So
Uh-huh.
that's one pathway forward. And we always want to provide that international context. There's sometimes when, you have rules of the road that were written in other jurisdictions, talking to people about how those worked, what happened, that, you may not want to copy paste it, but there might be a good lesson learned in there that can help jumpstart some thinking. That connector role is really important. And we want to help advocate for this technology and tell people what they can do. So a lot of times of what I'm looking for that we love, the content I love putting on our website or on our social media is like, how are people using crypto? Because it is not in the US especially, it's not as relevant as you have where like people in Singapore are using crypto to pay for their student loans. People in Argentina are using it to pay rent. People in Lebanon are using it to buy groceries. So there's all these cool things that are happening around the world. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I want the CCI website to be and our blog and our analysis to be is like giving people those case studies to say like, hey, this is all the cool stuff you can really do with this tech and then it's up to you guys on how you wanna do it.
That's great. I think there's a lot of opportunity given where the industry
Yeah.
is to tell those stories and those consumer stories, those use cases, not just consumer, but use cases across the board.
Yeah, exactly. Like, for example, the example I love giving is that we partner up with Mercy Corps Ventures, who are, helping to fund startups around the world, and they do
Uh-huh.
pilot projects using this tech, and they write these very detailed reports on, like, what happened, why, how, here's the data behind it. They're a fantastic organization to work with. And one of the ones there are these farmers in Kenya
Uh-huh.
who we did a pilot project with. And given all the advances we have in satellite technology, satellites are very, very good at picking up conditions of drought. So in Kenya, they partnered up with this insurance company where once these satellites are picking up, like, hey, this is going to be a really big drought,
Okay.
it triggers a smart contract. The farmers get paid in stablecoin and they can actually get paid out their insurance for climate situations
Uh-huh.
immediately. They can
Wow.
get those payments within days versus waiting for, on the ground stuff to trigger, hey, there's been a drought here for a few weeks. Oh, by the way, now all the resources are strained,
Yeah.
all the supply chains are strained. And so getting like the money that they need to maybe buy extra crops for their livestock, it's going to take them a really long time. Whereas through all the technology we have, it's like, boom, this is coming. Here you go. It's all executed through smart contracts and use crypto to pay it out. So it's an example of like, yes, this is happening in Kenya. There is no reason this couldn't happen in the US. There's
Right.
no reason why it couldn't happen in Canada. Like, this is a really cool example of what can happen when you get really smart people together to solve problems quickly.
Yeah, that's definitely solving major world problems, which, people probably think crypto, they think Bitcoin, and that's likely it.
Yeah.
So the technology, based on just the example you gave, was incredibly fast.
Mhm.
But you're in DC,
I
you're
am.
working with the government that's moving incredibly slow at times, especially on innovation. How do
Mhm.
you marry those two things? How do you navigate that communication strategy, knowing the industry is going to move light years faster than Congress, the administration, et cetera?
And I think a lot of times what people forget is sometimes the rulemaking process is slow by design. Because you have to build consensus and you have to talk to a lot of people to move things forward. So I think like step 1 is understanding exactly like how the government works. What is the process needed? How do things work through committee? How do you work with staffers? What do they need to kind of move things forward and kind of go from there? Tech is always gonna move very quickly. They're 2 very different animals. But I think the thing is you have to just meet people where they are. And you have to say like, "Okay, if this is what you need, we have to give you the right information. We need to connect you to the right people, so that way you can go through your process. We can meet you where you are." At the same time, what we've seen is we've seen tons of people in DC, they get it. They know that this stuff is moving very quickly. There's some very, very smart people on the Hill who just really understand that, like, the ins and outs of this technology, how things are working. They see, how other countries are moving, and they don't want the US to be left behind. So there are a lot of people who are really working to advance things forward as quickly as they can. So it's just kind of about, how can we make sure we're always responsive,
Uh-huh.
we're always helpful, and we can kind of get people what they need and have those conversations. Like, it's a very relationship driven town, DC, but people are also very open to having conversations and learning new things. Like, there's just this like atmosphere here of people wanting to kind of make those connections and pull out
Huh.
interesting bits of information. So if you have something to say, people will take the meeting, they will listen to you, and if you can make your case and meet them where they are and say, this is what I think you might need, they're going to take that. Because I think we've all been in meetings with people in crypto, regardless, not in policy meetings, but where like the terminology is just like off the charts and you just speak in jargon and acronyms. And all industries are kind of guilty of this. It's not just
Uh-huh.
just tech. But I think, yeah, like the more you can provide those examples, provide those case studies, like there's examples of people in like in the American West who are using crypto for last mile broadband. So instead of saying like,
Okay.
hey, this is going to be really expensive to get broadband to your rural community, the town can actually use crypto and some of the decentralized nature of the technology to solve that last mile delivery
Huh.
problem. Well, like that problem is also true for people in New York City who also don't want all the sidewalks dug up for different
Yep.
cables. So you can use the same technology. That's the same type of story. You just have to, when you're meeting with those people, say like, okay, well, your constituents care about this and that. This is how this story translates that. So we do tons of like We do one pagers, we do lots of case studies, we
Mhm.
do lots of, one-to-one coffees and meetings. So the team's always very busy. There's a lot to talk about.
And how big is your team? You mentioned the
The
team?
comms team?
Yeah, how big is the comms team?
The comms team and CCI. We are a mighty team of 2. We have 2 comms people. It's myself and my colleague Emily. Mm, and the CCI team in general in DC, there's about 7 of us. So it's a small
Okay.
but mighty team in general. That's
Yeah.
like policy folks, legal folks, all of the above.
Wow. Wow. So I'm going to ask this and you'll tell me if I'm off base or not.
Yeah.
But one of the things I always think about when I think about DC is the congressional hearings you see on C-SPAN, CNN, whatnot. It could be for any reason, but I'm going to guess, or I'm going to ask the question, I guess, have you had to prepare your CCI CEOs or any CEOs in your career for congressional testimony? And if you have, how do you think about it? How do you prepare them? What are the pieces of the puzzle that people, our listeners probably don't necessarily get the experience for, don't have the chance to touch and feel, and that they should know?
Yes, I have. And, for people who are on the C-SPAN viewing stuff, there will be, like, Amanda's in the background behind my various bosses just sitting there looking very thoughtfully. One of my in-laws watched one of the hearings, like, God bless him. My father-in-law watched one of the hearings, but I had, like, my professional, like, look he always sees me in, like, like, T-shirt and sweatpants and stuff like that. And he was like, "I didn't see you there." Like, and then I sent the screen grab. He was like, "Oh, wow, you look really." I was like, "Oh my god, I need to do better at family gatherings." It was so cute. He watched the whole thing. It was very, very sweet. Brings I remember very clearly the first hearing that Sheila was preparing for, and we were briefing her, and we had our lobbyists, and we had some other folks there, and like, at the end of the day, I almost kind of think of it as like a working meeting. So
Mhm.
there's different types of hearings, and so I think a lot of times people think, "Oh, they're, like, always really bad." Like, "Oh, you've been called in to talk about something," and, like, you do see those. You do see
Mhm.
those on TV. But, like, these were not the ones that we were called in for. I kind of was looking at it as, like, this is a working meeting with members of Congress who have questions. They are hearing directly from industry the answer to their questions to advance pieces of legislation. So it's our kind of job to come and present
Right.
and say, like, look, we're going to make the case. Here's how we're going to make the case. And so the thing to kind of think about is this is a televised event. Like, this is on C-SPAN. Like, it's not going to be on, broadcast news with what we were doing, but it was there. C-SPAN was there. They're all recorded. So you have to have 2 components. There's a timed component where you have a 5-minute opening remark where you can
Mhm.
read your remarks, and then basically everyone in the committee can ask you questions, and they could be of any type of question they could ask you, and there's a time limit for your responses.
And are those questions like, do they give you those questions in advance, or is it like a typical media interview where
I
you
mean,
don't know what's going to be asked?
I sometimes you could get some requests from different offices that said, "Hey, we may have we may have X, Y, or Z types of questions," but you have to prepare for anything because they
Got
could
it.
ask you anything that they wanted to ask you, and like our job, as I view it, is to be helper elves. Like, we're there to answer questions to help move the process forward. But because there is this, like, public component, I was very happy and willing to kind of jump in and be involved as best I can to help prep the team because it is about presentation style. It is about delivery. It is about how you're communicating what you want to communicate and what you want to emphasize. So part of that kind of process is a little bit of public speaking coaching and that type of delivery, which I mean, the executives I've worked with, they are very gifted public speakers in general. So my job has not been a very heavy lift for that stuff, but it was a very much a, okay, let's prep everything that we could ask
Mhm.
and let's do something called a murder board. So when I first heard this, I was like, what are we talking about here? So the murder board prep, as people have called it, is that thing where you could ask, you kind of put your hat on, like, I'm a member
Uh-huh.
of Congress, and I'm going to ask you any question that I would like to ask you. Ms. Warren, what do you think about blah, 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 blah? And so the idea is we have to get the executive on their toes. So it's
Right.
about, for my different teams, what I like to have is one sheet of information with the data points on it that are the most compelling examples and data points that we need to get right. So like how many people use crypto? What do the different polls say about crypto? What's the rate compared to using crypto versus wire transfers, like making sure that we have those prep sheets ready to go. We're going through the numbers so people have that in their head and they're ready to go. And so that kind of process we take very, very seriously because we view it as something that politicians take very, very seriously. So we're trying to make sure that we're mirroring the effort that their staff puts in for these, that their team puts in for these, because they end up going into the legislative process. So it's a very important dynamic for how, things become legislation. And so it's a big deal. Then we, take the written statements very carefully. I think our written testimony was something like 40 something pages. We had 50 or 60 footnotes, probably maybe even more. I think it was over 100 footnotes where we were just like, we want to give them as much of the raw data as possible.
Yeah.
So we went like footnote crazy. Like the team who helped with that, like they were just like, they go above and beyond because that's their job and that's why we hired them. So it's kind of like a dream team of prep stuff that goes into this hearing,
Gotcha.
testimony prep.
That's a lot.
There's a lot. I know I threw a lot of information at you. I threw a lot of info.
No, I mean, just the process of
Yeah,
a congressional testimony. Obviously, a lot of people only see what's on TV. They don't see all the prep work. And that's part of,
yeah,
our jobs as communicators is like they don't see us in the background doing all the work that gets that
yeah,
person on TV in front of Congress of an
yes.
interview for a newspaper
Yeah,
or magazines.
and, like, I'm sure this happens with you all the time. Like, I'm an over preparer, so I will put together a bunch of different documents and I'll redo things, and sometimes we will never use them.
Uh-huh.
They will never come to the light of day. We didn't need them. It was overkill. And people are like, "Oh no, like you did all this stuff." And I'm like, "That's fine. Like this is literally part of the job is the prep work. So if we don't use something for this, like maybe we can turn it into something later. Maybe this comes up as a separate request from a member that we can use this for."
Uh-huh.
So, that's kind of stuff I have no problem with because it's just part of the gig.
Right. Right. You and I were both at the Reagan Future Communications Conference in Austin. One of the things that kept coming up was measurement and how we actually
Mhm.
merchandise our work, our campaigns
Mhm.
back to our stakeholders.
Yes.
How do you think about that from a policy perspective? I have a hard time believing it's just, well, we got this legislation passed and the wording was what we wanted, but that
Oh,
takes
no.
forever. So I can't imagine that's the only way you're measuring your work.
Yes, after many, many years that started, pre-CCI. Pre-CCI, this stuff started, but, I will claim this as, in the genius legislation passing. As a sort of traditional communicator who's come in from an untraditional communications background, like, I love numbers, I love data. I generally think the more eyeballs that are on your work is a good thing. So we always want those numbers to go up.
Mm.
We will track in great detail how many people are coming to the blog, what blogs are performing well. Why do we think they're performing well? We have that, analysis in our editorial meeting, and we report that up to our leadership team every week. We obviously will look at social media engagement.
Uh-huh.
Crypto lives on crypto Twitter. So that platform and knowing what's going on there is very important to the community. We always want to make sure that we're on top of what people are discussing. We may not be able to jump in on some of those conversations because we are a trade organization, but we have to kind of know what's going on at all times. And then also we have what I always like to do is media metrics. Are people getting in touch with us? Are
Uh,
reporters coming back and asking us repeat questions? Like one of the things I will always tell any executive that I'm working with is like if we're not seeing repeat business from a from a journalist, we're not being helpful. So our job as people who are in a trade association is to be helpful, to provide that context for reporters. If we're doing our job right, when things are happening in the House or happening in the Senate, people will get in touch with us. What's going on? Can you tell us what's happening? And those people could be policy reporters, they could be, industry trade press. And one of the things I think we heard from our conference was, trade press is back, baby. I
Mm-hmm.
personally never thought trade press left, but that's just me. But now all the LLMs are scraping all the stuff
Mm-hmm.
from these trade organizations. And it's like, oh, by the way, you need to know who these people are. And I was just like, oh my God, these are the reporters who are covering your industry. Like, why wouldn't you talk to these are people who are so knowledgeable about what's going on. Like, why wouldn't people talk to them? But I was happy I was vindicated.
Well, that's a whole different conversation we can have
Yes.
later on
It's a
around
follow up.
trade press, the evolution of media.
It's a follow up.
But yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think the just being able to measure it in a way that you've outlined makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And you have to track what's happening for your team, for your executives. Like our leadership team is doing lots of very complicated discussions with a lot of different people in our membership group, people on the Hill, people in international organizations like, the BIS over in Europe, the
Mm-hmm.
European Parliament. There's a lot of stuff happening. My job on the comm side is to feed up to the leadership team. Like, what else are we seeing? That they need to know about? How could we be helpful? So that's the metrics are important because we need to know where are trends leaning. What are we seeing? And could we jump in? Yes or no, and why?
Got it. All right. Last question. We obviously had a very interesting journey, worked at Davos, worked at CCI.
Mhm.
What's the one thing or one tip, piece of advice, future skill that you think the next generation of PR practitioners need to think about and know and take to heart? What would be the one thing that one piece of advice you gave to a college class that you're talking to?
Oh my God, if I went to a college class. Oof. I will say that the advice that I told you at the beginning that I was thinking about before we
Uh-huh.
chatted is the advice that I would give people today. It still applies. You have to say yes. It doesn't matter if you're scared to try a new project, to try something new. Say yes, figure it out. Because people will genuinely help you. People will genuinely help you. And I think people don't give themselves enough credit. They really can if they put their mind to figuring out a problem. And if someone is willing to take a chance on you and they say, I see something in you that I think you could do
Uh-huh.
well with this, it's worth an exploration. It's worth an exploration. And then the other thing is, yes, say yes in a meeting too, and always talk in a meeting. If someone wants you in a meeting,
Uh-huh.
there is a reason why you're there. You don't have to artificially insert yourself into something. Like, don't interrupt people if they're saying something there. But, you know, there is a perspective, and even if you're with people who are a lot older than you, like
Uh-huh.
I was always the youngest person in the room when I was at IHS by decades. And it was a little intimidating for 26-year-old Amanda
Right.
to be in the room with the SVP of comms and the CEO and all these other people. And but the thing was I was there to do a job
Uh-huh.
and they needed to know I was there and I was going to do the job. So that's why I was like, okay, I'm going to put my big girl hat on and I'm going to tell these people, you folks, we're doing these 5 interviews today. I'm going to pick you up at this time. We're going to go to this. I will have a snack for you in my bag. And then we will go from there. And so they got to know me as they
The
were like,
person with the snack in the bag.
yeah. And you know what? Everyone wanted that snack, Joe, in Davos. Everyone wanted that snack, including myself. So that was I was like, this is just myself. I like sometimes being team mom, and I'm gonna have a snack for you in your bag and your talking points.
Well, this was amazing. Thank you so much for
Thank
taking the
you,
time.
Joe. Everyone's got to follow Joe's podcast. This is I'm excited. I'm excited to learn something because you have this amazing network, and every time I'm with you, I learn something new. So I'm very, very excited for what else is going to come out of this.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate the time. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Cool. Thanks, Joe.